What is up, Knicks fans? Welcome back to yet another episode of Fireside Knicks with your hosts Dylan and Ryan. And today we're going to talk about an interesting free agent target that has been brought up recently, Luke Kennard. He was recently with the Memphis Grizzlies. Obviously, a lot of people know him as a really good shooter. I think that the Knicks could really use him personally, but we're going to dive in and talk about that right now. So, Ryan, first off, tell me how you're doing. And secondly, when you hear about Luke Kennard being a possible target, what do you think about that? Do you think he'd be a good fit on the Knicks?
Absolutely. And some of the things that I saw in his data from last year that were really intriguing, he is in the 95th percentile in off-ball gravity. So that means that when he doesn't have the ball in his hands, defenders are still paying attention to him. And him as a movement shooter, in terms of movement speed, he ranks in above the 90th percentile in movement speed and catch and shoot threes. Dude, he's in the 99th percentile in catch and shoot three-point percentage. I believe he's in the 94th percentile in corner three-point percentage. So this is a guy where you have him running around the perimeter. He's got good speed. He's actually in the 92nd percentile movement defense distance as well. So this is someone who is comfortable moving a lot. You're not going to feel like you're going to burn him out throughout a season. You can have him come off the bench and do so the minute total isn't high on him, and you get those explosive 15 to 20 minutes, and you know that he doesn't need the ball in his hands. He can generate offense for you whenever. And Dylan, when you look at the composition of the New York Knicks roster, they have a lot of guys who can handle the basketball, who they can score with the ball in their hands, but the Knicks were not very good in terms of movement off the ball, offensive motion when the guys didn't have the ball in their hands. You have Luke Kennard running around the perimeter like a madman. He's 6'5". He's not a small guy either, so on defensive assignments, he's not a great defender. Like, let's not get this twisted. This guy's not going to help you defensively very much, but when he's on the court, he's probably taller than his matchup, and that's important. If you run him with Miles McBride, he's taller than Miles McBride. If you have Brunson and Mitch out there, let's say you don't have Cat out there, and you have Kennard out there, you have better spacing, and you can run these lineups where Mitch is still involved with the team, and you don't worry about the spacing. He would be such a beautiful fit for this offense, and Dylan, I think, again, the off-ball play and the motion play, that's exactly what you need in a bench player right now.
Yeah, and the Knicks especially need shooting. So I think, personally, if you ask me, Luke Kennard would be the dream signing. I think he would be someone that you would sign him and he'd immediately make an impact. Look what happened when we had Dante DiVincenzo, right? He was someone who, he came in the game and eventually became a starter, of course, but, whenever he was in the game, you felt his presence out there because he was just shooting the ball. He was letting it fly, he was shooting it at will, and he was hitting it at a good rate. Luke Kennard shot 43% from three this past season, and he's a career around that same number. So he's always been a very good shooter for the large part of his career. And I really think that he would be an amazing fit off the Knicks bench. And I think, too, just because of how long he's been around and how, quickly adaptive he is to different systems, he could even be a starter on this team. And I'm not saying that he definitely would be immediately into the starting five if he were to be signed by the Knicks, but, he has the capability to play well enough to become a starter, right? But plus, too, as you were saying, I think his fit next to Miles McBride would be great because, Miles McBride, he's improving as each year goes along, but, he's still not like the amazing playmaking point guard that we have because we don't exactly have shooters around him off the bench, right? It's mostly just like him and Mitch that run the second unit, sometimes Precious Achiuwa as well when he was here, and Cameron Payne, Landry Shamet, things like that. But when you have Luke Kennard, a guy who's going to consistently get minutes, a guy who will consistently be in the rotation, I think you give Deuce a very good shooter right there to, play alongside, and as you said as well, Kennard off the ball, catch and shoots. That'd be amazing for us. One of the things that the Knicks really struggled at last year was three-point shooting. They could not shoot the basketball, especially in the second half of the year. I know the defense was such a problem throughout the year as well, but if you ask me, I think the offense was a bit of a bigger issue and more of a glaring issue because with the amount of talent they had on the floor, there's really no reason they should have been struggling as much as they did offensively. Now, I know some people have been, saying that like, oh, we can go after more like playmakers or more rim protectors. If you ask me, I want guys that can shoot. I do. I think you need to prioritize backcourt depth in any way. Yes, I agree that the rim protection was not great last year, but you need backcourt depth. I think Luke Kennard would be a perfect signing, and I also think he'd be fairly cheap as well, because the Knicks don't exactly have like all the money in the world to spend in free agency. They're not exactly hard cap, but you don't want to go over the second apron. So, with all that being said, if you can sign Luke Kennard to a very cheap deal, have him come off the bench, and just shoot the ball, dude, that would be amazing. If you ask me, that's really what I think about that. I want to know, though, what you think about if there's a possibility of, like, if Luke Kennard could sign a multi-year deal, more than 1 year, or if he were to sign a bigger contract, could he end up starting right away? Could they end up trading, say, Josh Hart or something like that, and then throw Kennard into the starting five? Do you think that's a possibility?
So the reason I would push against Josh Hart being replaced by Luke Kennard in the starting five is I do have some defensive concerns. I'm not sure that Luke Kennard is going to play good enough defense, but I will acknowledge, as you mentioned, Josh Hart, it's not like he's a phenomenal defensive player, and you're not like you're losing size either. I think you'd be really concerned if you're losing both size and defensive abilities. You may be losing some defensive abilities, but you're not losing size. You're putting a guy who's 6'5" next to Jalen Brunson. Again, the height advantage will give him an advantage against some guards that he's playing against, and he's roughly a league average defensive guard by, again, just proxy of being tall. So I would prefer him to come off the bench if I wanted to insert someone as a starter. I want someone who's a little bit better of a defender. But if you told me, hey, Ryan, Josh Hart's not in the starting lineup and Luke Kennard is, I'd say, hey, there's a way to make that work. There is. The number one concern I just have is you have Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson together, and those two have historically not played great defense throughout their careers. But I do think one thing you can do, Dylan, is you can stagger minutes well, where you don't have Kennard playing all of his minutes or most of his minutes alongside Brunson and Cat. You have him playing a good chunk of those minutes alongside Brunson and Mitch. And then you have, when Cat subs back in, you have Hart come back in, so that those minutes where you don't have Brunson on the court, yes, you don't have Kennard, and that's going to hurt your spacing a little bit, but you have Hart, who can play make a little bit, can distribute the basketball a little bit, can handle the rock, and very importantly, you have, let's say, McBride most likely in the game alongside Hart. That type of guard duo is going to be far more productive defensively than a Kennard and Brunson one. That may be one that's more beneficial to Cat's play style or his deficiencies. So if you stagger the minutes properly, there's a way to make that work. And then again, Dylan, you just think of it from an offensive standpoint. Luke Kennard running like a maniac around the perimeter while you have Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns as primary offensive threats. Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby can score if they need to. That's when you create this dynamic offense that might be able to score. I mean, they might score 118, 119 points a night. That's how good that offense could be, just the spacing alone. So, Dylan, I think there's an argument for or against it, but I think I'd say you kind of have to sell me on that one. I'd have to see it play out a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. At the same time, though, I do wonder if, let's say they were to bring in Luke Kennard, would that affect the head coaching search? Because they are going after Taylor Jenkins, who was just coaching Luke Kennard this past year. Obviously Taylor Jenkins knows how to use Luke Kennard because he just had him. So, maybe that would impact the way his minutes are used. Maybe that would impact whether or not he starts or whether or not he comes off the bench in an extended role or whatever it may be. I just know that there's been a lot of, people saying might as well just start Deuce McBride instead because Josh Hart doesn't do anything offensively. And that's a fair argument. I was someone that was against that for a lot of the year until I really saw the, flaws that Josh Hart had offensively and the lack of aggression that he had offensively. Luke Kennard shoots with aggression. He will let it fly no matter what, and he plays hard. He plays with a motor. He plays really fast. I think he would bring a whole new dynamic to the Knicks offense that they haven't really seen in quite a long time. Now, at the end of the day, he's not like the perfect player, but I do think he'd be a dream signing just because of the fit he would have on this roster, because he's someone that would really fill in a lot of holes that they are missing. They're missing an aggressive shooter. They're missing aggressive scoring off the bench. They're missing the three-point shooting in general. You know what I mean? So, with all that being said, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the defensive concerns are valid, but I think the offense is just too much to just pass up on or to at least not, really consider. I know there's other targets out there, and we'll make other videos and get into other targets as well, but looking at Luke Kennard specifically here, I think he'd be great. I think he would. I think this would be like the left-handed version of Dante DiVincenzo, I guess, if you want to call it that. Bringing in a guy who plays with a high motor, high energy, and just shoots the ball, and shoots it very efficiently as well. Because that's exactly what Dante DiVincenzo did, and look how impactful he was for us in his one and only year with the Knicks. I wish DiVincenzo was still here, but, you got to give up good players to get good players. As we got Karl Anthony Towns because of him. It's just an unfortunate cost. It's just the reality of the situation, but you can replace that production if you go ahead and sign Luke Kennard. Before we do wrap this up, I want to give you an opportunity if you got any more final thoughts on Luke Kennard, if you think he should be a good signing, or what kind of price range would you really sign him at, things like that. So go at it if you got anything else to add.
Yeah, the last thing I'd like to add is the emphasis, as you mentioned, on spacing and shooting. It's not just that Luke Kennard's a good shooter, it's that Luke Kennard is a positive impact player by just being on the court, by just existing on the court. Defenses have to adjust for him. And that's something the Knicks desperately lacked in their offense last year. Teams were not as, oh, we have to be on Mikal Bridges at all times on the perimeter. Have to meet this guy as soon as he crosses half court. It's let him run around a little bit. He's not really going to move around a little bit, and it's not a shot at Mikal specifically. It's the offense they ran last year. Luke Kennard, immediate threat the second he crosses half court. Defenses have to pay attention to him, and man, you just think about the space that's going to be opened up for Jalen Brunson or Karl Anthony Towns or OG Anunoby, or I hope Mikal Bridges as well, to get in the paint, use their size or use their scoring abilities. The only guy in that group who lacks size is Jalen Brunson, and I'd argue he's as good as all of them, if not better, at scoring when he has room in the paint to operate. So yeah, that's really my final thoughts. It's just the impact without the ball in his hands.
Yeah, no, the impact he has is a great impact. And, off the ball, I think he would be great. I think he'd be a great spot-up shooter for us. And like you said, defenses have to pay attention to him because defenses were not paying attention to Josh Hart. They were just throwing their center on him. So, when you got a guy like Luke Kennard out there more often than not, defenses have to pay attention to him. And that's, I think, very important. It'll open up the floor more for Jalen Brunson to go to work and Karl Anthony Towns as well. It'll impact the whole offense as a whole. I think it would make it a very beneficial thing. And it doesn't come at the cost of anything. He's a free agent. You can sign him for a pretty cheap deal. We're talking like 1 year here, maybe even 2 years if you want to go that route. You don't have to sign him for a ton of money because he's one of those guys that, he has replaceable production, so he's not going to be like a one-of-one type of player. He won't get like crazy money. He'll be someone you can sign for cheap. You got to give it an opportunity. I personally think that they should go ahead and really consider signing him once the free agency period begins because I think he'd be a great fit for us. But I do think this is a good place to wrap the episode up. So let us know what you think about Luke Kennard in the comment section below because we would love to talk with you guys about that. We know he's a pretty interesting player, so we would love to hear what you guys think about him. You can follow us on all of our social media platforms as well. We're on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course this YouTube page that you just watched the video on. You can listen to the audio version of this on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure you give a 5-star rating on those. You can follow me and Ryan's personal Twitter accounts. They are right there above our heads. And we will see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Knicks. Peace out, and let's go Knicks.